Are you scared of AI? Do you think that AI will become too powerful?
I am a little scared. A company out of California being sued by a family whose son lost his life.
Yeah, that's awful how AI had told that person to take their own life, which is not something that we want to happen in the future.
I think AI in the very near future will be thousands, if not millions, of Steve Hawkings and Einsteins. There is no limit to what AI could achieve.
That would be something I am definitely excited about seeing. Welcome to the Young Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Malina. Today's guest is a globally respected futurist and a thought leader in AI and design. He's the president of ImagineQ, where he leads Canada's first open source humanoid robotics project. He is also the best-selling author of his book, The Three Houses, along with his new book, Soulful AI. I'm super excited for this conversation. Let us please welcome Mr. Colin Singh Dhillon. Mr. Dhillon, welcome to the Young Leaders Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Malina. Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited for our conversation today. But before we start, I do want to let our viewers know that there will be a very fun Would You Rather session relating to AI. That is a session you do not want to miss, so stay tuned till the end. Mr. Jinlo, we're going to start off with a mystery question that was left by our last guest. And don't be surprised because it is not related to our topic today. Are you ready?
I'm ready for it. Go for it.
So the question is, what is your definition of empathy?
Wow, that's also very kind of connected to hopefully some of the topic we're going to talk about. What is my definition of empathy? Um, I being empathetic is something that's probably being suggested as a human trait. But I would probably expand it to saying empathy is a trait and something we in the human world and animal world have. To be empathetic means to care. To be empathetic means to listen, to understand. To be empathetic means to acknowledge the other person's position. And I think sometimes animals and pets do that too.
And do you think that AI could do that as well? Because you recently released your book, Soulful AI. Is that what it kind of talks about?
It does throughout the book. So yes, the title is Soulful AI. I think the argument is today the large language models is what most people refer to as AI. Though, if you start to research it, AI is being there for I would say over 30 years, and folks in the technical world have been using artificial intelligence and machine learning definitely for the last 2 decades in major ways. So the large language models, which is how a lot of people refer to AI today, for me is intelligent quotient. It is just IQ. It is definitely still missing the mark when it comes to emotional intelligence, empathy, social and spiritual intelligence, and adversity intelligence.
Do you think that AI could get to that level where it could be empathetic and feel what others are feeling or help them in ways when they're feeling down or certain emotions?
100%, absolutely. If we look at the growth of large language models over the past 12 months and some of the work, some of these major organizations coming out of Google, for example, around their work on empathetic AI, I definitely see that. You know, already if you use this one particular site called pi.ai, and you choose your voice for the AI. I actually did it first about 12 months ago. And my first name is Colbier, pronounced Colbir. And the AI first pronounced it Colbert, but the second time in the next paragraph announced it Colbir. And I was like, oh, wow. I said, you got my pronunciation right. And the AI turned around and said, well, I'm glad I did. You know, you're obviously have family or heritage or ancestry from northern Punjab, and you're more than likely a Sikh. And next thing you know, 25 minutes had passed by because I was so engaged with the conversation and the responses. And so we're still at the early stages, Malina, and I think it's only going to get better. And my book is about making sure we create those data sets, whether actual or synthetic, to help us get to emotional AI intelligence.
Wow, that's incredible. It's interesting how it was able to pick up on saying your name correctly, especially with how when it started, especially let's just talk about ChatGPT, for example. It was very robotic, very, I guess, professional, overly professional in some cases, but now with all the training that it's getting, it's able to understand our needs and speak to us in the way that we would want it to speak to us, which is really cool. And why did you get into the topic of understanding AI?
I finished a major national project in, I would say, at the end of 2022, where 2023, when we showcased Project Arrow, Canada's first electric car, it allowed me to kind of sit back and catch up. To be honest, for about a good 12 to 18 months, my focus was just on building and developing an electric vehicle. And in November of 2022, that's when I think ChatGPT 1.0 came out. And I started to, I'm an early adapter. I started to use it in early 2023. Um, and my first book was about titled The Three Houses, which was about a journey to a better life. And it was about the inner engineering of us as humans. And I told my story to try and make it more palatable and more tangible to those that could maybe connect. Those that know me, those that don't know me, hopefully it came across that I was just an average person who probably lives next door to you. And so I felt the movement in AI and the work I began to do around AI kind of led to your initial question about empathy. And I felt it lacked it. I felt it was very robotic. Um, and then I started to dream of the ways in which AI could be used as a spiritual guide, as a counselor, as a person that you can confide in. And there's obviously been some horror stories over the past 12 or so months with a company out of California being sued by a family whose son lost his life because he had confided in a character generated by AI and had asked if he should take his own life. And the AI and all the knowledge it had gained of this individual over the past several months and where his mindset was suggested that maybe that is the best solution. And so that is a thing that should never, ever, ever be muttered by any type of AI, whether it's through software or what I call physical AI, when you embed it into a device or an object like a humanoid. And so I think there's a lot of work for us to do: global regulations, safety, ethics, governance models. But I think we will get it right. I am always a glass half full as opposed to a glass half empty type. But there is a lot of work for us to do, and I'm happy to try and support in any which way I can.
Yeah, that's awful how AI had told that person to take their own life, which is not something that we want to happen in the future, especially since they were a young child. And AI can get really powerful because AI doesn't know any better the same way as humans do. We have a sense of logical thinking that isn't, I feel like, ingrained in AI the same way, where it can feel empathetic to others. But hopefully that will change in the future, and I think it will make things better. Um, I remember having a conversation with one of my guests, and we were talking about how if AI was a teacher inside of a classroom, rather than having an actual human teach, that they feel like it would not be as engaging and not be as fun because teachers can sense and know when like a student has understood a topic or not. And do you think that AI could be able to get to that point where it'll know that, okay, some people are focusing and some people aren't, and that it can talk with it and understand it? Or do you think that we have a long time to go till then?
We're already in conversations. That's me and my colleagues in a non-for-profit organization we've set up called the Designing Change. We are already having conversations with academic institutions, both high school, college, and university, about the delivery of education. Now, Malina, the delivery of education as we know it today really came about since the Industrial Revolution of the 1700s. And so prior to that, the question is, how was education delivered in the centuries prior? And the definition of a classroom, which typically includes a individual who is the teacher, a group of children who are the students, and then the tools are normally some kind of a device behind the teacher, which was a blackboard, became a green board, became a whiteboard, and now maybe a projector. Those tools and the model hasn't necessarily changed. And do I believe they will change and maybe change in the next 5 to 10 years? I absolutely do. Do I believe AI could be funny? Do I believe AI could be a disciplinary? Do I believe AI could be as good as a human teacher? 110%. So, how? Well, today, having an optical sensor, which could be a camera, and the software which has facial recognition, some of the best facial recognition softwares today recognize over 1,000 or 10,000 expressions on an individual's face, from
Wow.
somebody who's happy, somebody who's sad, somebody who's upset, somebody who's angry. And so for us to have an optical sensor set up and for it to be able to see the facial expressions of every one of those children, it's doable today. To have a profile of every child, to understand their personality traits, is going to be doable tomorrow, let's just say. And so I think it will. Again, back to your first question and my book around empathy and emotional intelligence, we have to get the emotional intelligence right of this device before we try and implement it in classrooms. But I do see the whole delivery of education changing. And to be frank, it needs to, because I think we've all been there. And I know you're a lot younger than your uncle here, but sometimes you may get bored in class, but that boredom isn't coming from or stemming from that you're a bad student. It could become from the point that the education or the delivery of the education is something that you already know, and you already feel it's below you or it's past you. And so a physical teacher, struggles to be able to pivot between what a single student needs versus maybe a group of students needs. So I'm hoping that the delivery of education is actually going to get even better with the use of emotional intelligence and AI.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like everyone can relate to the fact when you get bored in class, especially, let's just say, in my opinion, geography and history has been quite boring to me, and it's something that I just want to kind of sleep through. But I feel like with artificial intelligence, you can make it more fun, maybe. I'll give an example on how my sisters and I use AI to teach us after school and on our free time. Is we use ChatGPT as like a teacher, as a tutor, and tell it that you cannot give us the answers to the questions that we have, but you can guide us by asking us one by one, okay, what do you think is the next step until we figure it out ourselves? And I feel like that's an important way for people to use it. I've had many students that I've seen that use AI to just like completely get their assignments done just for the sake of handing it in and getting the marks. What they don't realize is that aspect of learning that they're missing out on that could possibly help them in the future. And so my dad tells us that when you use tools, it's meant to amplify your learning, not take it away and just do it for you, which is why he says that he loves how Microsoft calls their AI Copilot, because you're the one who is driving, you're the one who's driving the plane or the car, but the AI is helping, I guess, well, helping amplify that experience, which is very important.
It is, and I think, Melina, if the audience doesn't know who your dad is, we should mention my dear friend TJ Wallier, who was my student, my teacher when it came to developing chatbots in GPT. And so I wanted to develop a chatbot last year, and your dad jumped on the call and said, "Well, hey, this is how we do it, and these are the kind of creative standards, I would say, and the prompting that's needed to create this, and add as much information that GPT can then use as reference. I think I have over a dozen chatbots, and now I'm building AI agents. So, and I think you're correct, and I think how we use it as a tool is important. But the one thing I would say about AI, which is unlike any other tool humanity has ever developed before. So, fire was a tool, electricity was a tool, steam was a tool, computers were a tool. This is an agent. This is an entity that has a higher IQ already. ChatGPT 4 has an average IQ of 170 when the average human has an IQ of 100. And we're only at less than 30-40% of Wikipedia, and we're at less than, say, 10% of the global internet being used to power the knowledge base of ChatGPT 4. And so it is a tool that is like no other. And I think that is why global regulations are super important. Because I think the one thing humanity has been lacking for centuries is empathy. Back to your original question, we're here today in June 2025, and there are multiple battles and wars being fought,
Yeah.
and they're being fought over the name of faith, the name of religion, the drawing of a line over a geographical piece of land, over cultures, over languages. I think the more spiritually awakened we become as humans, the more petty all of this becomes. And so, to my earlier point of tomorrow, AI could be your spiritual advisor, your teacher, your guide. I think that's going to be super important because I think sometimes we all get sick of what's going on, and we also get scared of what's going on. And if you look at what is actually going on, you shake your head because it's like, why?
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like it is important. I feel like the aspect of having it as like that spiritual teacher is important. I've used it in some ways as well, in my life to understand more about my culture, my religion, my history, about who we are, where we came from, understanding our bot, our Bani that we listen to, everything. It comes down to how it can help us. And I found it to help in a lot of ways that makes it easier. Recently, when we were at that event, we were talking about how AI can help not just our culture, but many cultures understand their history in a much deeper way, which I feel like is very important.
I agree. Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you, what was your dream as a kid? And like, is it related to what you're doing now, or is it like completely different?
That's a great question. And because I'm so old, I'm having to really go back into the
You're
memory.
not old.
Old. I'm going back into the memory bank. I've always been a dreamer, Melina. I think being a dreamer has led to me being on this creative path. I was good at sketching and drawing. I was always creating these fantasy characters. When I saw Star Wars in the 70s, I dreamt of going to different planets, not necessarily as an astronaut, but just as a passenger on a spaceship. Um, Whenever I've seen things which inspire me, I wanted to be a part of them. I think I dreamt of a level of freedom. I think I dreamt of like happiness. And, for me, coming to Canada from the UK was a dream. Coming and living in these beautiful houses and surrounded by, honestly, I think some of the best people in the world was a dream. I came in 90, had a look and had a feel for a few weeks, and then I went back and completed my education and came to live in 93. And I think, though it may not have been, I want to create, the next electric vehicle or create Canada's first open source humanoid robot, which are projects I'm doing today, I don't see them as necessarily dreams. I see them as responsibilities for Canada, as me as a citizen of Canada. But the dream was to live in the house I'm living in, for example, today, to be married to the person I am today. Honestly, I really did look out there, and then to have the two wonderful kids I have. Like, so I think I dreamed of that level of contentment, and I somehow materialized it and brought it into reality.
That's incredible. Are you scared of AI? Do you think that AI will become too powerful, especially with all those sci-fi movies that we have of AI taking over the world?
You know, I grew up at the time when Terminator came out, and I reference it in my book as well. I am a little scared, and that's why, So let's just dial it back a bit. When we talk about autonomous vehicles and autonomous vehicles on roads, I was very loud to say to our multiple levels of government, don't create regulations which will jeopardize the growth of autonomous vehicles on the roads. We need to have these moving at the pace of what our neighbors south of the border are doing in other parts of the world. So I was kind of somewhat anti regulation on that topic. But on AI, I'm all about global regulation. I think we need to get it right because of that earlier point we talked about, where I don't think people are spiritually awakened enough to understand the benefits. I think, you know, greed and jealousy would maybe put AI into the wrong hands, and people can use it to do bad and evil to the world. So I am, but I'm also glass half full. I do see there is more goodness in the world than bad. So I am pretty confident we will get it right.
Yeah, I feel like it would be, I mean, I obviously do not want a AI apocalypse to happen, but I feel like if we can train it to understand, as we were talking about empathy and the good in the world, it could probably overcome those negative feelings that maybe some of the people who have it with, like, if it goes in the wrong hands, it can maybe hopefully think for itself and understand. I mean, I know that sounds a bit far stretched, but maybe it could be possible, especially with all the technologies coming out. I feel like there's nothing that's impossible these days.
It's not too far stretched. If we compare it to prejudice and racism within humans, normally it stems from not knowing. I grew up in an era in the UK where I was surrounded by racism and prejudice folks, and but when they started to get to know me, when they understood who I was, it tended to melt away for the most part. And I think some people may have a prejudice against AI because they don't know it, they're not deep in it. And then others are actually the opposite. They're very deep in it, like Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, who, since he left Google a few years ago, he's back here in Toronto because, Canada and Ontario and Toronto, let's just say Canada is the global center of AI. We have two of the three godfathers, one who runs a center in Quebec called Miller, and the other one who is associated with an organization called Vector Institute here in Toronto, Ontario. Jeffrey Hinton is always now talking about the fear of where things could go wrong with AI. And so I think we do need to listen to the likes of Jeffrey, but we also need to make sure we get this right when it comes to regulations.
What do you think is the biggest myth that people believe about AI?
The biggest myth that people believe about AI is that it's always correct. It's not. Um, it hallucinates, as you probably know, and I know, and others that use it on a daily basis know. I can tell you an example. I was working on a report, a national report, and we were citing the report with references. And there was one particular section that I felt we needed to increase the number of citations. And so I thought, okay, I've done the hard work. I'll now just copy this into GPT and ask it to cite it for me. Oh, it did. It gave me a dozen or so citations, and I would honestly say 80 to 90% of them didn't even exist. It gave me a URL to nowhere. It gave me
Yeah,
a
I've had that
comment.
happen.
Yeah, and the comment sounded like somebody like Elon or Jensen had said, but no actual reference to. So I think that's one of the biggest myths, that it thinks that AI is absolute, and it's not.
Yeah, it can, like, make up so many things all the time. I've had moments where it's like, I've done the research for something, let me just quickly find some citations for it, or even if I give it the links, and I just tell it to cite it in like a certain format, it will change up the links and give me something completely different that doesn't exist. And then I'm like yelling at it. I'm like, what is wrong with you? I just gave you the links and it just doesn't seem to understand. But I feel like with more practice, obviously it will get better. But I feel like AI will never always be right. I feel like there's always gonna be something that will possibly come up that might um I guess make people lose trust in AI.
I think it's like, again, if we add emotional intelligence into AI, then its personality, if we can say, becomes more like humans. And let's face it, can you always trust any human being 100%? And do we trust any particular human being 100%, other than maybe our loved ones? And so I think it begins to reflect and resemble humanity. But there are other platforms. If you're looking to do citation work, Perplexity may be better than GPT. It may be better than Copilot. So Gemini may be better than Claude on certain things. So there are other old options, but again, we have to remember we're in the infancy of large language models. We're at that early stage. Like I think it was 2009. Steve Jobs held up a glass rectangle device, which was his iPhone, because all other great devices had keyboards prior, and said this was the future. And by the way, these little squares are called applications or apps, and it's going to be $1 billion industry. And people were like, "What?" um, and suddenly it became, and so it gradually occurred and happened. And today we talk about, we don't even use the word application, we just use the word apps, and we
Mhm.
all understand it as a new word or as a new language, sorry, a new added addition to the dictionary. So I think it will improve. There is a long way for us to go. Remember, it's using less than 10% of the internet's knowledge base. As soon as it gets to 50% plus, I think there is going to be changes. There are going to be diseases being cured in the next 20, 30 years or less. There are going to be things that we're inventing and building and creating that we maybe never even thought of because of AI. So I think there's a lot of good to come out of it as well.
Yeah, there's this one thing my dad tells me about. It's you don't know what you don't know. And it's like when you do something, you might not realize that there's a problem behind something. You end up solving that instead of what you were looking for. And it's incredible how AI can help us get all of that and like fix problems that we didn't even know existed, which would be absolutely incredible. Now, I want to ask you a question that my youngest sibling has been asking me, and but I'm just going to ask it in a more deeper manner. Do we really
Okay.
understand the full potential or the full power of AI?
No, but I would say somebody like Jeffrey Hinton and what he's saying. And by the way, he just dropped a podcast on Diary of a CEO, which I will probably listen to over the weekend or early next week. He is projecting the potential of AI. There is also a great book, The Singularity is Nearer by Ray Kurzweil, it's a very tough read, but it's a great book for the projection of what AI could potentially do. And so we are already, people like myself, who I'm a bit of a futurist, I'm a thought leader, I'm a, you know, I'm trying to envision things 10, 20 years down the road. I think people like me are already talking about the potentials of new innovation, new ideas, curing diseases that have strangled humanity for centuries. I think the potential is so vast because let me put that into context. If we look at an individual who found a cure for, it's always a individual or maybe a partnership of two or three individuals. So that therefore is the brilliance of that one individual or a brilliance of three or four individuals that worked and combined together. Now imagine that, but in the volume of billions of individuals and their knowledge. And so, if you bring that brain trust together, which is what AI will be in the near future, I think we're going to see changes that we could have only ever dreamt of.
Wow.
Solving mathematical problems that we could have only ever dreamt of. Let's not forget the nuclear energy. if broken down to its basic form, was mathematics. And people like Einstein and others that were involved, if we do the math now, from the greatest minds, Steve Hawking's included, I think AI in the very near future will be thousands, if not millions, of Steve Hawking's and Einsteins. There is no limit to what AI could achieve.
Wow, that would be something I am definitely excited about seeing. I know I love to test AI sometimes when I ask it. Yeah, this I feel like it's important for this generation to see how powerful AI can be and the things that it can do, especially if it's something that we only dream of and we don't realize that it can happen is incredible when it does happen. So I love testing AI. Sometimes I go through these, I guess, phases where I want to become a scientist or understand things about planets or the universe, and I feel like I ask AI, and I'm like, could we time travel? Or questions that I feel like is not something you can easily talk to with people because not everyone, like, we haven't solved that theory yet. And then I'm like, of course, it doesn't answer it directly. It'll be like, no, unfortunately, we cannot. I'm like, okay, hypothetically, if we could do this, then it gives that idea and it makes you realize that if you ask it the correct way, it could possibly open up something that would be incredible. And I feel like it's really important for us all to learn how to use AI. Um, Starting off with schools and the younger generation for them to understand how to correctly use AI, I feel like is very important. A part of when people do use AI, do you think people are using it too much? Do you think that AI will make people smarter, or do you think that they'll make it people lazier and dumber?
Um, I think we're going to see a change to both learning and knowledge, um, um, how we hold and how we share and how we use knowledge. So let's go back to pre-industrial revolution. Let's go back a few thousand years. Let's go to Greece and the time of Aristotle and some of the great thinkers of the Stoic period. Um, if Melina and Colin wanted to go and see or listen to a great Stoic that was visiting, say, Athens in Greece, we didn't go in the fear of being marked late if we turned up 10 minutes late when he started his lecture, and nor did we go for the fear of failing or not getting the credit of a particular learning that he was providing. We went for the sheer want and desire to learn and to know. And so I think it's naive for us to think that somehow since the Industrial Revolution that education has become better. It actually hasn't. If you read even pre-industrial revolution, the likes of William Shakespeare or the likes of Guru Nanak, from the 15th century, um, people have been learned for a very, very, very long time. Just the method of how you learned changed. We made it more machine-like with public schools. So I don't think AI is going to make us dumber and not as smart. I think it changes the things we learn. So look, one of the arguments I could put forth is 80% of what I learned at public school, primary school, and then high school, I've never absolutely ever used or applied in the real world. And so I think what we will see is real world applications of learning. Learnings of multiple languages no longer being limited to knowing one or two languages, and maybe not even having to learn multiple languages because AI can now communicate on behalf of us. And so now, hundreds of languages are kind of defaulted to everybody understanding what somebody else is saying because of other devices we're wearing, augmented reality glasses and microphones and speakers allowing you to translate and to hear it in real time. So, no, I think it's going to take us to another level. And I am doing some research to try and really define where was education, pre-industrial revolution. So I am going a bit deeper to try and justify, some of the suggestions I'm going to be making for the near future.
That sounds really cool. But so then you think that AI is going to be doing more smart learning than just generalized teach the children everything, let them figure out their stuff. versus having AI teach you the topics that you want to learn to help you become successful in your career and happy, instead of going down a path of wasting, I don't know, how many years, 18, 20, 25 years, learning something that you're never going to use again in your life. I think AI can really help change that. But when you were talking about how we learn languages, right, and how AI can help do that for us, would that not make us, I guess, not like we're not going to be learning those languages as much, right? But do you feel like that's a good thing or
Well, let's think about what learning provides us. Learning is, I was told when I was at school that the objective to getting to university isn't about graduating from any specific field of knowledge. Rather, it was to be able to tell you as an individual you're able to obtain the tools needed to be able to listen and learn and to contemplate and then to deliver at a certain level. And really, being at a university, doing your undergrad and then your postgrad, simply means you're able to understand and appreciate a broader sense of learning, and not again not specific to any certain field. And so for me, um, what is the value of, to me as an individual, to know 20 languages versus knowing just one universal language, whatever that may be in the near future, and being able to communicate with others? Because what is life? Life to me, somebody who's now in his mid 50s, is about trying to wake up and go to bed and wake up every morning feeling happy, and feeling good about myself. And I think universal income is something that's been spoke about, Malina, which means governments may start to look in the very near future of providing every human with certain amounts of money per month, because humanoids are coming. Humanoids are going to be replacing a lot of the labor work that's done. So the cost of labor will shrink in the next 20 to 30 years. And so I think learning changes. I don't think we're now going to be learning in this kind of mechanical way, because if we don't learn, then we don't get a good paying job. And if we don't get a good paying job, I can't go on vacations, or I can't go here, and I can't buy this. I think all of this is going to be reevaluated. And I would definitely say the world needs to be watching what China is doing, because I think China is years ahead of the rest of us when it comes to a lot of this.
okay? That really does help clear things up for me and change it up, because I feel like, yeah, learning 20 languages versus learning that one or two languages that you would need is, I think, a huge save in time as well, now that I think about it, because you would spend many years trying to learn those languages versus not, and you could just use AI to help you. That's very cool. Well, now we're going to get into a fun little would you rather session that I'm super excited about.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, are you ready? It's going to be three questions and you just got to answer them, okay?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. First one is, would you rather have your AI randomly start rapping your to do list, or you have your GPS give you directions in a sassy teenage voice?
My GPS in a sassy teenage voice.
And why is that?
Because my current voice is some kind of like English accented male. That just sounds too polite.
Too polite. Okay. Okay. Would you rather have AI randomly scream self destruct in 5 seconds randomly during a day, or have it start beatboxing every time someone says the word data?
Beatboxing every time someone says the word data.
That would be cool. Like a little rap battle right there. And the last one is, would you rather have AI roast you like a stand up comedian, or one that cries every time you ignore it?
Don't do too well with tears, so roast me. That would be phenomenal.
Roast you randomly, just like, let's just say we're in the middle of this
Just
recording, it just comes up
random. Yeah, yeah. It just starts to go like, buddy, yeah, just sit back. Yeah. Calm down, mate.
and that would be fun. Thank you so much, Mr. Tinlon, for being on this podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I do hope that our viewers who are watching this enjoyed this as well and hopefully learned something new.
Well, Melina, thank you very much for inviting me onto your podcast. The questions were phenomenal. I also hope our viewers and listeners enjoy the podcast and take something away from this. So, all the best for the work you're doing, and keep it up.